So, there are a class of weapons in CS2 right now that, if the current trends continue, will become the rarest and most expensive class of items in CS2 as we know it. This one's not because of hype or because of Chinese manipulation, it's because of just pure math and market fundamentals. Through recent updates to trade-ups, the Genesis terminal, the path forward for the incoming supply of these items just got greatly decreased. Now this is a theory, this is speculation, so do your own research if you buy into these items. However, if the market is left to its own devices and no new updates come in, it is very realistic that this class of items actually does come to fruition in being the most rare and expensive items in the game. Of course, relative to their... Now, to understand why certain items are about to become untouchable, we need to talk about what Valve did to trade-ups. I will briefly explain it for context here, however I have more videos in depth explaining it. I'll leave it in that little box right there. Essentially, Valve fundamentally changed how trade-ups act and work within CS2 after the knife trade-up update in October 2025. Previously, all guns that were float capped had their inputs taken at face value, and then that face value was averaged into the input total, and then applied to the output. So if you had a P2000 Amber Fade, which goes from 0 to 0.4, and you had a 0.3 float, it would be counted as 0.3. Trade up 10 of those, you would get a field-tested gun in 0.3 wear. Traders exploited this for years. You could use cheap skins from collections with narrow ranges, and the outputs were low floats, even though 0.3 out of 0.4 is actually pretty relatively high. So Valve changed it, making that the float capped guns were now on the same level playing field, and they would be scaled up to a 0 to 1 float before being averaged in. So if your P2000 was 0.3 and the range is 0 to 0.4, that's 75% of the total wear available to you. So the skin would now be counted as a 0.75 as opposed to a 0.3, meaning that if you took 10 of those, traded them up, your output would be a battle-scarred weapon. So this single change completely changed what you could and what you couldn't use in a trade-up anymore. On top of this, the collection output was changed, meaning that you can't game the probability of what output you were going to get. Previously, you would use collections with fewer outcome probabilities because that would weigh your odds in favor of the collection in which you desired. The new system calculates odds per input, right? Each one of your 10 skins will contribute a 10% probability as to what collection you will get. It doesn't matter how many outcomes are in each collection. So now you can't game the probability of the collection, nor can you game the float values anymore. Everything is on an equal playing field. Now, since these two changes happened at once, there were now a new pool of trade-up fillers that were actually useful and good for people to use for trade-ups, which meant that there was a lot of low float inputs out there, and a lot of the number one floats that previously existed got beaten rather quickly. Anomaly actually made a video on it, and I saw it, which inspired this whole idea. But as we'll see, those amounts of number one skins coming in over and over again, the window's starting to close. So these new fillers that got these number one floats have either already been used, or they've been pumped to prices in which the trade up, is a decent amount of risk to you, the trader upper. So now the amount of these trade ups being attempted are going to decrease over time. So now either the inputs are going to be more expensive, or it's just going to require a lot more time to get the inputs that you want for a desirable result. So now the economics don't really make sense for most of the trade-up attempts you're going for, especially if it's like 10-20%. So previously, how did low floats enter the market? Two ways: cases and active drops, basically a random drop. You unbox it and your float is pretty much randomly generated from 0 to 1. Cool, luck of the draw. Now with thousands of cases being opened every day, there is a slow but steady supply of low float guns entering the market each day. But with cases becoming more expensive by the day, and with now all rare cases being discontinued, there is now a hard cap on both the number of skins we can get from each case, and if we use probability, how many of each skin we're going to expect from those cases. Now, while there are still active cases in the drop pool as well as the armory right now, the Fever, it looks like Valve is trying to eventually move away from the case system within Counter-Strike 2. Their biggest hint of that was the release of the Genesis terminal in September. Now, I also have a ton of videos theorizing about the Genesis terminal and how Valve could potentially use it in the future, so you can check those out, but this is just more of an analysis of it. And I realized when I was looking at the terminal that all skins within the terminal have a 0 to 1 float cap. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is the only collection in which all of these skins have this trait. So that's significant. My biggest tell was the AK Ice Cold was 0 to 0.7 float cap. The AWP Ice Cold, which is in the Genesis terminal, has been made 0 to 1. So it's not like it's the creator's wishes doing this. So it's significant because if all skins that are older are being phased out by being discontinued, besides getting super lucky from a weekly drop, in which even if you get a low float skin, it's probably going to be like a gray or a light blue, your only realistic way of obtaining low float items is going to be through the terminal. And as we know, low floats are sold on the terminal at a premium. So you have to purchase the skin from Valve directly and they make the prices. You can't just randomly get lucky and pay $250 and get the lowest float gun in the world anymore. So yes, low floats will still be coming in, but there'll be significantly less of them because you'll have to buy them. An average player can't just open a case, get lucky, and get the 5th lowest float gun in the game anymore. It'll be super expensive and he won't pay it. And that's going to hurt supply. Now, even if cases go into the shadows, we still have the armory, right? If Valve simply gives future armory collections shitty float caps on all the guns, you'll still have to use the terminal to get desirable inputs. So not only do you need these super low float inputs from the terminal, but the guns having inputs from the actual terminal collection, as we spoke about earlier with the collection probabilities, your odds of getting the output you want are going to just be lessened because you need to put these fillers in, and these fillers fuck up your chances at the output. So that leads me to my theory about the rare item class that I mentioned at the beginning. Valve made trade-ups harder. Obviously, why wouldn't they? But the outputs that stand to gain the most are the ones that have been rendered pretty much impossible by the new trade-up system in place. Combine that with the fact that the low float supply has been axed, essentially. And as I said, even if you use terminal skins with low floats to get your average float down in the inputs, your output chances are now hurt because every terminal filler you enter is another 10% chance you're not getting your desired output. Today's video has been sponsored by the lovely ladies and gentlemen over at skinsmonkey.com. Skinsmonkey is the industry standard trading forum and marketplace for anything and all things Counter-Strike. 24/7 support and an instant trading system so fast, those Bulgarian overpay goblins are sure to go out of business. Now, if that's not enough incentive, throw my code Mike in on the website for $5 off on your first trade. But if you trade up to $100 on the website, they'll double your bonus from 5 to 10. Now, if you don't have any skins and I just gave you some free game on investment advice, you could deposit money and use the website as a marketplace as well. In that case, my code Mike will net you a 5% deposit bonus, bringing it from 30 to 35%. So go get swagged out, courtesy of skinsmonkey.com. And that's why the guns we're interested in are .06 to X float capped weapons. In factory new specifically. Let me explain why this specific float cap creates like an insurmountable barrier. With a .06 minimum float, the inputs need an adjusted float cap of .0135 in order to guarantee a factory new output for this gun. Let's say you want to craft a P250 Whiteout from the Chop Shop collection with a .062 float, for example. So the output range is .06 to .8. To achieve a .062, a .0027 float. So basically every single input skin needs to be 0.27% of the entire float cap. So if it's 0 to 1, you need a .0027. If it's 0 to 0.5, you need a .00135, for example. So those are extraordinarily rare and extraordinarily expensive as is. Now that the supply is being cut, they will increase. So now you need a near perfect float for every single input. So not only will the discontinued inputs just kind of naturally fade away in anywhere, because theoretically the only way you would get them are now through the terminal, or by paying an exorbitant amount of money on another marketplace. And you combine that with the fact that, for example, the P250 Whiteout is a blue, which means there's other blues in that collection. So even if you do this trade up, if you fail, you just get a random blue from that collection in a super low float, useless. So the ROI on the trade up itself is in the gutter, meaning that people aren't just going to do them. So that's your class of items. 0.06 to 0.8 float cap weapons, and of course subsequently the fillers needed to get there. Here are some skins that share this, there's a ton more though. Crimson Webs, knives and guns. The R8 and the Scar Crimson Web are unique in that they're blues in a case, meaning you can't trade up to them. The only way of getting them is unboxing them. The Nitro skin class has this trait. Whiteouts, of course, probably the most popular one. As well as the Bengal Tiger P250. I know there's an AUG, I'm not sure what the float cap is. It's probably the same, no, I'll check. So you could purchase the guns themselves or the fillers. Now, for something like the P250 Whiteout, for example, all of the inputs have pretty shitty float caps. So a super, super low float USPS Peregrine is probably already expensive, but will probably get even more expensive, especially if like the P250 gets buffed or something. This is a long-term play, this is a boring play, it's a speculative play. But anyone can make a call on a fucking sticker capsule, and of course it'll go up in 10 years because they're limited supply. Let's save the boring stuff for the stock market. This is our playground. Let's have some fun. Let's stand to make some fucking fuck you money. That's my theory. Let me know if you see anything wrong with it in the comments. I'd love to discuss it with you further in the comments or in the Discord, whatever you prefer. Or if I didn't make a point as clearly as I could have and you need clarification, feel free to reach out. Check the pinned comment. I'll have my schedule for the live stream tonight, as well as all of our sponsors and links associated with the channel. Cheers.